here. Does this feel a bit heavy-handed from New South Wales locking up Victorians possibly?
Well, I don't agree with your assessment. I mean, I think politely a lot of these measures are superfluous on the simple basis that the Victorian government has already identified the 10 hotspots. There will be proper police checks and security measures put within those communities to make sure that those who are at risk and pose a risk, of course, therefore, to the rest of the community will be contained. And I expect that is what is going to happen. So I'm not taking anything away from the New South Wales government. They have a responsibility to protect their citizens. But I think the Victorian government, at least in how they're managing it now, is likely to take away the risks that they're concerned about.
What have you made of the nearly 1,000 people in 2 particular suburbs with a lot of positive tests refusing to take COVID-19 tests?
Well, I think I'm with the rest of the community as well as the Prime Minister, which is it's a basic expectation that people take basic tests to detect the risk, not just to themselves, but also, of course, to the rest of the community. Now, there will be some cases where people may not do it on medical grounds. Those are very much a case-by-case basis, but I think when it comes to the overall expectation, not just that everybody should have for themselves, but for their community to protect others as well as themselves, as well as the community at large, is that it's a pretty simple, basic expectation to get tested for a virus we know has a very dramatic impact on those who have weak immune systems, the elderly, and of course the general community as well.
Meryl Swanson, what did you make of what we just heard from New South Wales? This is obviously the government, the state in which you lived. Did it sound heavy-handed, a bit threatening?
No, look, I think Tim used the word superfluous, and I would argue that it isn't superfluous. We know that this is an incredibly contagious virus. We know that this has really decimated large chunks of the world and our economy and our health. And I think that, if we were to look back on this in a couple of months, if it came to New South Wales and said, oh, Gladys Berejiklian and New South Wales should have done more to contain this. So, look, I think all along we've erred on the side of caution. And look, I just want to extend my sincere and deepest sympathies to Tim and people in Victoria. It must be really crushing to have to go back into lockdown in these areas. I've lived in Victoria myself. It is a fantastic place. We are all in this together. Dan Andrews, and I think Tim has just said he's doing a good job. The Victorian government has done a good job. Gladys Berejiklian has done a great job, as has Anastasia Palaszczuk. We've worked collectively really well on this, and I think we just have to hold the line when the health experts tell us to.
We had only about a week ago the Victorian Premier not wanting to go into any detail about how the outbreaks happened. When people wanted to know, was this because of private security guards? He said, I don't want to identify anyone. Now he's saying this is where the issue was. This was the weakness. Was he a bit slow to be willing to apportion blame? It might seem harsh, but you've got to do that to be able to figure out what's going wrong, fix those errors?
Look, I think, Tom, that apportioning blame is one thing, but I think you do need to have the facts behind you before you apportion that blame. We don't want to scapegoat people. I mean, look, those security guards are there doing a difficult and dangerous job, really. So we actually have to just go back to protocols, procedures. We do need to find out where it's broken down so that it can be fixed. But I think that the blame game isn't productive, but I think finding out what's happened and sorting it, as Dan Andrews has done, is the critical thing. And we just, it's basic, but we just need to keep doing what we've been told to do.
Major defence announcement today and a pivot as well from the Prime Minister, Tim Wilson. He's talking about a bigger threat in the Indo-Pacific region. Let's be honest, this is all about China, isn't it?
No, it's about making sure that a country like Australia can defend its national sovereignty and its interests in the region, but also, and this is a critical point of the conversation, to make sure that other countries can stand up for their own sovereignty as well. The interest of Australia in the Indo-Pacific is not to have one particular dominant partner or the other. It's to make sure that every country can stand up for their own 2 feet, be sovereign in its own right, and for that to be respected. Now, of course, there are emerging situations and emerging events that present challenges. We know there's been an increase in the expansion, the influence of China, but that we have to make sure we prepare for every scenario. And the reality is we're in a challenging world, and one more challenging, frankly, than we thought even 5 years ago.
What country is a major threat to Australia's sovereignty other than China?
Well, as I outlined, we have to be prepared for every circumstance. Now, I know you want to go down one rabbit warren, and of course I've been a long-standing critic of the Chinese Communist Party. That one be a surprise to anybody. But this is actually about us, and about us being able to defend our national sovereignty no matter what circumstance may come past. 5 years ago, we weren't talking about the current challenges that people are raising about China, and we don't know what's around the corner. So by making Australia and ensuring Australia can project and protect its sovereignty and helping other countries to be able to do the same is the best pathway for peace and stability in the region.
Meryl Swanson, the PM, pointed out in the late days of the Gillard and then Rudd government, defence spending was at 1.56%, the lowest as a percentage of GDP since the Second World War. Was that a mistake, and should it not be repeated by Labor again?
Tom, we have said that we are going to keep defence spending at 2% of GDP, and that is something that we are deeply committed to. Just as Tim has said, national security and defence really should be beyond partisan politics. It is a very, very serious matter. We know that we've got the specific step-up program that is happening through the Australian Defence Force currently. We know that we have terrific engagement with our Pacific neighbours, from all sorts of sporting and cultural linkages, and it's really important that we continue to grow those linkages through the Pacific nations. We know that up into Asia, we've got great business linkages up there, but we also know that China is a really complex neighbour of ours. We know we've got a deep and complex relationship with China, and we have to be able to navigate that. We have to be able to have clear and really strong leadership. And that's what the Morrison government needs to embrace. And I think that, we've actually really done a good job in saying that this must be beyond politics. And Anthony Albanese has been very strong on that, as has Richard Marles, the Deputy Leader and Defence Minister. And we know that there are challenges ahead. We know that there are, difficult negotiations and difficult relationships to be navigated, particularly with China. But we are, we're a smart country. It's not beyond us to have a good relationship with China, and we need to be constantly working towards that. Our trade is pivotal.